We continue to follow developing news in Afghanistan. The U.S. military working to evacuate American citizens and Afghan refugees. Joining me now is Kimberly Motley, an international human rights attorney and an American who practices law in Afghanistan. She's been helping clients there for the past 13 years. Welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us. You've, I'm sure, been talking to women in Afghanistan. What are they telling you?
Well, a lot of women and little girls are extremely scared and terrified about what their future brings in the country, because the reality is as shocking and horrible as the scenes are at the airport, that the vast majority of women and girls are going to have to remain in Afghanistan. So they're really concerned. They are concerned about what their basic human rights will be followed.
And what do you see as the future of women and girls in Afghanistan? Do you trust that the Taliban will honor their promise to let girls go to school?
Well, I mean, I can say that within the last week, while the Taliban has taken control of this government, that girls have been turned away from school already. We've seen the pictures of, people painting over black paint over women in public spaces. We see more burqas on the street. We see less women on the street. I've heard about women being turned away from work. There's a lot of really not great things that I'm hearing for women that are on the ground. But most importantly, the women that are on the ground, they're wondering what their future holds. And I think that what we have to do as an international community is really encourage that there be some type of summit that's held in Doha right now. And that summit needs to include Afghan women leaders who can come and meet with the new Taliban government in Afghanistan in person to talk about women's rights, to talk about human rights, to talk about and demand what their rights are. As an international community, we should make sure that our aid is conditional, that if the Afghan government, this new Afghan government, chooses not to, respect women's rights and human rights, then there's consequences to that. I think what this new government needs to understand, and they're certainly trying to maintain legitimacy, is that Afghan women are economic powerhouses. And if Afghan women are not allowed to work, if they're not allowed to go to school, their economy will fail. Period. It will fail if women are not allowed to go to work and go to school. And so we need to make sure that the new Taliban government understands that women are not just one-dimensional beings. Afghan women have been entrepreneurs. They've been business owners. They've been doctors, lawyers, housewives. They've been a successful, thriving part of this economy. And any trade that we do with Afghanistan as an international community needs to be conditional, because this government can decide what they want to do going forward. They can either make Afghanistan into an open-air prison, or they can try to make Afghanistan, this new government, as a thriving member in this global community of economy. But that will require that women have a seat at the table. It will require also, frankly, the UN needs to give Afghan women diplomatic seats. And it will require that they continue to have their rights respected, their human rights and their women's rights, and that they be recognized as the economic powerhouses that they have been for the last 20 years in Afghanistan.
That's a really great point. And do you support talks with the Taliban in other spheres as well?
Well, I think this is a situation that they're in. I mean, the Taliban is the new government in Afghanistan right now. That is a fact. That is happening in real time. And so we need to figure out how to move forward, because the reality is that once the last plane leaves, it's not as though Afghanistan disappears from the world economy. We're still going to have to deal with Afghanistan. We're still going to figure out if we're going to trade with them, how we're going to, engage with them. And that's going to require women who make up about 20 million people in the population to be part of those conversations in a real way, which is why this summit needs to happen right now. Right now, they should be having a summit in Qatar and women leaders, Afghan women leaders at the seat, and frankly, also the Afghan youth. Afghanistan is a very young country. About 75% of the country is under the age of 25. And so we need to make sure that their rights are protected, that they're respected as the economic powerhouses that they are, particularly the women and girls, and make sure that our aid or any sort of economic trade is conditional upon those things being followed by this new government in Afghanistan.
Yeah, I was thinking about it when I was reading your bio, that you are a woman who actually went to Afghanistan, trained lawyers there. That prospect could be all but gone now. How do you feel about that?
Well, I don't I'm still looking to work and see what I can do in Afghanistan after, the last plane leaves, I suppose. I haven't given up on Afghanistan. I certainly haven't given up on the Afghan women. And I will be honest, a lot of what's happening is heartbreaking, to be completely honest. I have a lot of friends there, Afghans and foreigners. There's still a lot of Americans that are there that still are trying to get out of the country. It's heartbreaking, but it's the reality. We can't, it's not about me and how I feel. It's about trying to figure out how to productively move forward in Afghanistan and to continue to try to support the women and the kids that are there.
And as someone who's spent a lot of time there, who's gotten to know the people there, particularly the women and the girls, what do you think Americans don't understand about Afghanistan?
Well, I think the thing that sort of is kind of getting on my nerves is that, the Afghans, they understood that the troops were going to leave at some point. So it's not as though, that was a surprise. It's really just crushing, and what's been a humanitarian nuclear bomb is how we did it. The way in which we left really was just so irresponsible, and that caught a lot of people off guard. It really was terrifying for a lot of people. I mean, literally, a week ago, people were, having coffee in shops and at restaurants, and it's a completely new normal. It's very, very disheartening there's a lot of people in Afghanistan that, I went there to help capacity build, to be completely honest. And I feel like Afghanistan really capacity built me as well as many other people. And they're very, very resilient people, a very strong people, very humble. And, they just feel I think a lot of women in particular feel very hurt with how the international community is responding to them. I think from their perspective, they knew who the Taliban were, and the Taliban are being who they are. But I think for a lot of Afghans on the ground, they thought they knew who we were. And I think we're disappointing them more than the new government, frankly. And I think we have a responsibility to make sure that we do what we can right now to make sure that particularly the Afghan women and girls are protected moving forward.
Good point. Again, this was never meant to be a nation-building mission. You mentioned that they always expected the troops to leave. We'd been there for 20 years. A lot of people arguing, should we have stayed indefinitely? And how should the withdrawal have gone if that's not the answer, to stay indefinitely?
Well, I mean, I think with the way that the withdrawal went, there should have been more coordination, frankly, with the international and Afghan NGO community and civil society. There should have been more conversations with those that are business leaders and things like that. That just didn't happen. And I think that not in a responsible way anyway. And so I think for people to call Afghanistan the forever war is a real fallacy. We still have troops in Germany based on, World War II. That was in the 1930s. We have troops still in Japan. That was based on what happened in Hiroshima. That was in the 1940s. So what I was seeing on the ground, frankly, was there was some turnaround. There's over 7 million girls that have gone to school within the last 20 years, which is amazing. We've seen that infant mortality rate can significantly decrease. We've seen women particularly representing in the political, economic, legal sector. I mean, women were really killing it in terms of really taking advantage of democracy and rule of law and things like that, as well as the youth as well. And so I think it wasn't as though, in my opinion, that Afghanistan was not going to be able to survive if the international community left. It's literally the way that we did it. There was very, very poor planning. The 15 months of peace talks virtually excluded women, which is ridiculous because our government was involved in that, frankly. And it frankly legitimized this new government within that 15-month peace talk. And that contributed to where we are today, frankly. So women have to have a voice, a real voice. Women are not one-dimensional things. They're beings. They don't have to just only talk about women's rights, but Afghan women have been part of this economy. And I think there's been a real disconnect with that happening, not just with the Afghan government, but frankly with the international community, who quite often has left women out of the talks, which never made sense to me.
All right, Kimberly Motley, you have an amazing story. Thank you so much for making the time for us tonight.
No problem. Thank you for having me.